All set? Judge Minor?
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. We apologize for the delay. There was a few matters that the three of us had to finalize, so this morning's procedures will be efficient, fair, and hopefully productive. This is Mrs. Danetta Rutten. This is Judge Grant Minor. I am Mr. Frank Prince Jr. We have been selected by the Port Angeles City Council to hear a complaint filed by Mrs. Smith against Deputy Mayor Kidd for the City Council meeting that occurred on 2 February 2016. The subject of that meeting is irrelevant. It has absolutely no bearing whatsoever on the work that the three of us have been doing for weeks. No bearing whatsoever. And I want to compliment so far people who have testified. They understood that. They have focused on the actions of the meeting, not the subject of the meeting. This morning's proceedings will follow in the same vein. The subject of the meeting is absolutely irrelevant, will not be considered, and we will move on. The subject this morning are the actions that occurred during the meeting. I see some familiar faces, and I welcome you back as you participate in our city government. I see some new faces. You don't know what you're in for. Let me take a moment, please, for those of you who have been here before, I beg your forgiveness. For you new folks, I want you to know why we're here, briefly, how we got here, and you can tell your friends. 9 citizens were asked to serve on an ethics committee. 9. We were interviewed by the City Council. We volunteered. No compensation. This is our free time, and it has been hours and hours and hours of such. When the complaint was filed by Mrs. Smith against Mrs. Kidd, by City Council statute, 3 citizens from the committee of 9 were selected by the council, voted on by the council, and asked to serve. We knew what we were getting into. Judge Minor, Mrs. Rutten, and I could have politely declined. Look at the weather today. Where would you rather be? But we said, yes, we will take on this task. We volunteered. We'll see it to its conclusion. By the way, that 9 people on the committee went down to 8, and now it's down to 7. And each complaint requires 3 citizens. 3, and we have 3 complaints. 3 times 3 is 9. We don't even have enough people. That's how rewarding some people feel this commitment is. This wonderful woman is now serving on 2 ethics committees. That is not fair to her. Nobody signed up for this gig. My apologies to you. I'm very sorry that that occurred. Judge Williams is serving on 2 committees, a retired Superior Court judge like my colleague Mr. Minor. That's not fair to him either. 7 folks to hear 3 complaints. Mr. Wilson, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming back today.
I wouldn't mention.
I know, sir. I'd like to address you personally, if that's okay with you, sir.
I'm innocent.
That remains to be seen. This is from Mr. Frank French Jr. to you, Mr. Wilson, and only to you, sir. You have raised valid points about Mr. Bloor being our legal reference to this committee. I want you to know they were not dismissed. I read them, I contemplated on them, I thought them long and hard, sir. I gave them all the due consideration. I want you to know that, sir. And I do appreciate the points you raised. It clarified in my mind how to proceed. I then consulted with Mrs. Rutten and with Judge Minor. Again, I referred back to the document prepared by the Port Angeles City Council. The three of us unanimously reaffirmed our decision to stay with Mr. Bloor as our legal reference. I totally, 100% respect your decision or your opinion. All right, sir? I simply ask, please respect ours.
May I make one reply to that?
Of course, Mr. Wilson.
My remarks were in direct response to your comments on the first day where you said you were going to assiduously avoid even the appearance of violence.
Yes, sir.
In my opinion, you have not done that with this particular decision.
I understand,
I
sir.
will respect your decision.
Mr. Wilson, I'm enjoying having you with us today, and I thank you for responding. Okay, sir?
Thank you.
I did want to say that out loud, but I do have great respect for your opinion and for what the service you're providing. I want you to know that.
Thank you, sir.
Before I get to a very brief explanation of our procedures this morning, allow me to make a little plea. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not the enemy. We are not the enemy. You know who we are? We're you. We're you, sir. We're you, sir. We're you, ma'am. We're citizens of Port Angeles trying to do our civic duty. That's who we are. There, but for the grace of God, you would be sitting here and I would be sitting there. We are not the enemy. We're three volunteer citizens trying our best to do a good job for the city of Port Angeles where we live. If any of us thought when we first volunteered to do this, it would evolve into what it has become, these seats may be empty, but they're not. We're here, and we'll do our very best for all of you. As President Obama eloquently stated the other day when he introduced Judge Garland, please don't make us political piñatas. That's not our role. We're not whipping boys. We're not political piñatas. We're just ordinary Port Angeles citizens trying our hardest to do our best for all of you. For all of you. When we're all done, some of you are going to be so happy with our decision. So happy. And some of you are going to say, how could they get it so wrong? Yeah. We understand that. I'm a basketball official. Every time I blow the whistle, half the gym loves me, half the gym hates me. Every time I blow the whistle. But you know what they do though? They simply acknowledge that I work hard. I give it my best effort. I asked on behalf of my colleagues, no matter how this turns out, please simply acknowledge that we tried our best. We did our best for all of you. Through consultation with each other, this morning's procedures will be as follows. using the Port Angeles City Council Guide to Ethical Conduct Hearings as our mentor or playbook. Pick your noun. Mrs. Smith will go first. Ms. Jennifer will administer the oath. Mrs. Smith has the opportunity to make a presentation to the board on facts, and more facts, why Mrs. Kidd's actions on 2 February 2016 violated Section J of the Ethics Code. I know that's new to some of you, but that is our system. All of these pages in front of me are irrelevant except for Section J of the Ethics Code. Mrs. Smith, during her presentation, will explain factually why Mrs. Kidd's actions violated Section J and Section J only. Nothing else is relevant. Nothing else will be accepted. After Mrs. Smith is done, we have a list of witnesses from Mrs. Smith. They will be administered the oath by Ms. Jennifer. They then will come up to the podium, and I will explain to them the parameters. Then Mrs. Kidd will come forward. Ms. Jennifer will administer the oath. Mrs. Kidd has the option of making a presentation to the board following the presentation from Mrs. Smith. After Mrs. Kidd is done, Mrs. Smith's witness will take to the podium. I again will remind her what the parameters are of being a witness according to the City Council guidelines. That being done, we will adjourn to private deliberations. Let me assure you of the next part. This is very important for all of you. No decisions are done in private deliberations. No voting is done during private deliberations. No outcomes are decided during private deliberations. The private deliberations are simply a way for the three of us to share ideas, to clarify in our own mind how we feel about this complaint. At a very future date, very quickly we hope, we will assemble here in open meeting. Each of us then is required in front of you, our fellow citizens, tell you how we feel and how we vote. Each of you will know straight up from our own mouths, yay or nay, pro or con, up or down, good or bad. Nothing to hide. I and my colleagues will stand behind our votes and our convictions, and we'll do it in front of you. One moment, ma'am. Just one. Thank you so much. Just a moment. If I ran a little long, not the first time, won't be the last time, but I thought it was important for all of you to get on the same page as we are. Now, I'll speak to this lady in a moment. This is not an open question-answer period. That was a month ago. Hard to believe. It's been a month. But this lady was polite enough to raise her hand. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering, you were making reference to Section J.
Yes.
Are you going to be reading that out loud so that we know specifically what it says?
I think that's a marvelous idea. I will ask Judge Minor, you think that's...
Sure, that's fine.
Mrs. Rutten, when we get to that? Sure, that sounds great. And maybe I'll do that shortly. With your permission, I'll do it right now. No?
I don't think
What is your
that's
name?
permission.
What is
Susan. Susan?
Very nice. I didn't think of that. Thank you. Where were you earlier when we were making all these plans?
Sitting back there somewhere.
Yeah, I envy you. I envy you. It's an excellent suggestion. And with your permission, Judge Minor and Mrs. Rutten, I will just briefly do that. Thank you. Here it is. Section J, General Standards of Conduct. There's about 8 points. Only about 5 are relevant, but I'll read them anyway. This is the only section of this entire document that the 3 of us are focused on and will abide by or rule on. Public officials shall comply with the laws, policies, rules, and procedures of the city. Public officials should not engage in any conduct or activities that reflect discredit on public officials, tend to bring the city into disrepute, or impair its efficient and effective operation. Public officials shall be honest, accurate, complete, and truthful in all matters dealing with citizens and with other city council members. Public officials shall refrain from abusive conduct, personal charges, and verbal attacks upon the character or motives of other public officials, staff, or the public. When in public, public officials shall explicitly state that any personal opinions do not represent the city. This next one is irrelevant, but I'll read it. No public official shall commit any act of moral turpitude or dishonesty relating to his or her duty or position as a public official, conviction of a crime involving moral turpitude. Okay, that is irrelevant, but you understand that. Public officials shall not use language or engage in acts that demean, harass, or intimidate another person. Public officials shall conduct themselves toward the public in a civil and professional manner that will foster public respect and cooperation. And finally, public officials shall not, unless expressly authorized, make any statements, speeches, or appearances that could reasonably be considered to represent the views of the city or the city council. In spite of all the documents in front of us, folks, that's the only thing we're looking at today. The only thing. Everything else is irrelevant, will not be considered, will not be addressed. Thank you for an excellent, excellent suggestion. Judge Minor, an opening comment, or have I covered it, sir?
I think you've covered it, thank you.
I hope so. Mrs. Rutten, an opening comment.
No, sir.
I've covered it.
You've covered it.
I practice in front of the mirror all night. I'm very tired. Mrs. Smith, you're up now.
Do I have to go over there first?
I'm sorry, Mrs. Smith?
Do I need to go over to Denver?
Well, we're gonna figure that out right now, Mrs. Smith. Why don't you go right there, ma'am?
Perfect.
Miss Jennifer will make that decision. She knows way more than I.
I thought I'd administer the oath from here.
Okay, perfect.
All right, so raise your right hand, please, and repeat after me. I state your name and residential address.
You know I'm going for the joke here. I, Merrill Lee Smith, P.O. Box 2498, Port Angeles.
Is that your residential, do you have a residential address?
I don't use it.
Mrs.
Should
I'm
that be
sorry.
a physical address?
Yes, ma'am. Where do you live? Thank you.
1013 Olympus.
Under penalty of perjury, do swear or affirm
Under penalty of perjury to swear or affirm
that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth during this proceeding.
Okay. I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth during this whole proceeding.
Thank you.
Miss Jennifer, thank you. That was the first time you've done that.
That was definitely my mistake.
I felt like I was getting married. Do I say I do now?
Yeah.
Mrs. Smith, please understand that other than Judge Minor, my legal training is completely from Judge Judy, and that's all I know. So if I make an error, I beg your forgiveness.
I have no...
This is your, thank you, Mrs. Smith. This is your opportunity to address us, your fellow citizens, specifically with facts that support your complaint against Mrs. Kidd, and you have stated those rather eloquently and succinctly. I encourage you to be factual, to the point, and nail it as you stay on topic, stay on point. You understand what I'm saying. Mrs. Smith, the floor is yours.
Okay, I have prepared binders for you as well, that I broke down into 3 sections, and the 3 sections are the signage and procedures, and specifically adjournment and breaks, recesses, and the last part is just my conclusions. So regarding signs, Cherie Kidd is on record with the PDN as saying that political signs have historically been banned from the council chambers. This isn't true. When there's something that's contentious that happens, people come out with signs. There is no sign prohibition in our city code or in the rules of the council procedures. This decision appears to have been made arbitrarily by perhaps 2 members of the city council, because in this PDN, Cherie said that she and Mr. Downey, Mayor Downey, had discussed it and they wanted things to get back to normal. I personally find her memory regarding historically is questionable, because I've been at city council meetings on and off for 20 years. I've seen a lot of signs. I don't believe that a lone city council member is permitted to make up rules as they go along. In your packet, I did include the exchanges between Mr. Wetham and Mr. Bloor. And Mr. Bloor in his letter says that Cherie made the decision herself, or she took it upon herself.
Okay, Mrs. Smith, let me help you, okay, to help us.
Let me...
No, go ahead, ma'am. Go ahead,
Okay.
please.
So basically, I'm going by what the ACLU says. And ACLU has written in a number of city councils in the last few years regarding the signage issue. And the ACLU says that sign displays represent a core exercise of free speech rights that strengthens the democratic process. Allowing the display of signs and posters at city council meetings is good public policy. It also reflects commitment to core First Amendment principles, for signs provide an important, if silent, means for members of the public to make points and express views. We believe that the government can inappropriately stifle resident speech as much as by tying their hands as by gagging their mouths. If the council sincerely feels the need to deal with issues of decorum, there are many avenues for doing so, short of restricting peaceful and silent exercise of First Amendment rights. So
Okay, let me, thank you. That's good, you're good. We're gonna work together here.
Yep.
Okay? Not cutting you short. You've made your factual statement about the signs. I encourage you, because we're trying to assimilate all this.
I know.
Work with us, winnow down your comments to factual, and you've done a nice job of that in here.
Right.
Okay? This is what's going to be on our lap when we go through that door.
Right.
But there, if you could verbalize what I'm reading, that winnows it down and it nails it, and that will be much helpful. The floor is yours.
I'm a writer by trade.
Now, you're doing very well.
Now, I do have to point out that I did this not out of any malice, not out of any political aspirations, nothing. It was out of my civic duty. Because I am a firm believer in our Constitution. So that was, and I believe that we do things for a reason in this country, and we should do them right.
Your next subject of
Is regarding adjournment.
adjournment. Thank you.
Now, it's been said that we don't need to follow rules of order, Robert's Rules of Order. This has been in the PDN, it's been said. And while it's technically correct that city councils are authorized to determine their own rules of order, unfortunately, it is inherent. Let me find my part. There's no statute that specifically says a town must adopt rules of procedure. That authority is implied. We use parliamentary rules to run meetings everywhere in this country. Every city council in the country uses a form of parliamentary order. Ever since 1560, when Sir Thomas Smith wrote down procedures, we've been doing them. So in our city council rules of procedure says, section 7, procedural decisions shall be made by the chair of the council, who may request advice on such matters from the city attorney, and may refer to Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, current edition.
Mrs. Smith, excellent. To be factual, do you have the reference number there? Each of these have like a little reference number there.
Everything, yeah, it's the section 7.
Section, that's all. Well done. Continue, please.
Everything I'm saying is in my conclusions.
Right, I know that. I want everyone to hear that you're reading from...
Yes, I'm reading from my notes or from what you have on your desk.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith.
Okay, so, regarding adjournment, there's about 9 different versions of parliamentary rules of order. There are parliamentarians who just specialize in this around this country. What I've included in my binder are a variety of different parliamentary procedures. All of them require one of 2 things. They require, before a meeting is adjourned, that the chair of the meeting ask, is there any further business? They cannot ask this while someone has the floor. Then they have to get a second, and then they have to vote on it. Or alternatively, what DiGiulio did is he would say, and this is an alternative and it's acceptable, is there any further business? And if none is forthcoming, he would say, since there's no further business, then that this meeting is adjourned. He said this verbatim at pretty much every meeting that I ever went to that he was at. All the rules are pretty much the same in this. The reason is because you can't gavel down someone while someone else has the floor. You have to permit them to speak. So nowhere could I find that a motion to adjourn would be required by a council member screeching out, this meeting is adjourned. That is not procedure. Similar to that is breaks for recess. Recesses are also privileged motions, and it has to be, I make a motion to have a recess for 5 minutes. There's a second, it's voted on. During that city council meeting, we had a call out by Ms. Kidd to, we'll have a 2-minute break, and Meredith stood up and started to walk away, and then she continued with the meeting. And then later she just said, 5-minute break. You can't do it that way. That's why there was mass confusion in that meeting. You can see it on the tape.
Go back factually, why she couldn't do that. Give us a reference. Why she could not do that. Nail that down factually.
Because it was a privileged motion.
Thank you. That's what I'm looking for. Continue, please. Would you like a glass of water?
No.
Okay.
I want a new foot. I hurt my foot. I want to ask you questions. Everything else I have, I know. I've written it down so many times in serious.
Your packet is quite fine. It's spelled it out. You're not obligated, Mrs. Smith, to go through your whole packet there. This is an opportunity.
I just want to focus on those 2 issues because that's what I have the most information on. And that's what's reflected in the binders. You know, overall, I felt that the tone of the meeting was adversarial. I was upset by the meeting, which is why I went home immediately, and I knew that there were codes of ethics and drafted this complaint. The whole reason I did so is because I believe that city government should work.
Thank you. Stay right there, please. I'm going to speak. Would you like to ask Mrs. Smith any questions?
Are you done?
Are you finished, ma'am?
Actually, I am, because
You
you've
are.
got so much written. I gave you a highlight.
And we appreciate that. There's no need to double duty. No, I thank you for that too, because I mean, I think we have some reading to do.
I have one question.
The judge.
I have here Ethics Committee review March 28, 2016, submitted by Deputy Mayor Cherie Kidd.
Yeah.
Did you get a copy of that?
No, I didn't.
Okay, do you have a copy for her?
Oh, we don't, it's fine. I mean, I would like to look at yours, but that's all.
Sure, that's fine.
We don't
You
have
can
a
do that.
copy of her information.
Okay, wait.
Yeah, right.
Hang on, ladies, please.
She can take mine, okay.
Well, no, hang on, may I make a suggestion? In this, when we get done with the public session, she's already shaking her head. Miss Jennifer will make sure that each lady has a copy of the other's binder. Is that an issue?
Okay.
Mrs. Kidd, is that acceptable? Mrs. Smith?
Yes, excellent. It was oversight.
No, no.
I only had 3
No, no, what you have, Mrs. Kidd has, what Mrs. Kidd has, you have.
Excellent.
Okay? That's, to me, is not even a question.
Okay.
Mrs. Rutten, anything from Mrs. Smith? Mrs. Smith, let me thank you for addressing us and helping us along the way. You may return to your seat. Thank you. As I mentioned to you, ladies and gentlemen, when you are a witness, not referring to Mrs. Smith and Mrs. Kidd, they're in a different category. If you're coming up and you are on Mrs. Smith's witness list or Mrs. Kidd's witness list, we welcome your testimony. Ms. Jennifer will swear you in. There is a very narrow procedure. You must do all you can to follow it. As Mrs. Smith did very nicely, when you address the committee, these witnesses, you will tailor your remarks factually, absolutely no opinion. You will tailor your remarks to Section J and how it violates Section J or it doesn't violate Section J, whichever side you're on. If you begin to stray, I will gently lead you back. But if I can't lead you back, then I will politely thank you. We'll move on to the next speaker. Facts, no opinions, Section J. Yes, violation, factually why. No violation, factually why. Narrow topic, stay on point, stay focused. When I call your name, if you decided, I don't want to do this, I don't want to be sworn, Mrs. Smith has said what I needed to say, simply say, Mr. Prince, thank you, I pass, and you have my respect. Mr. Mike Libra. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Miss Jennifer, you're up.
Morning.
Good morning. Would you raise your right hand, please, and repeat after me? I state your name and residential address.
I am Mike Libera of 316 Power Plant Road, Port Angeles.
Under penalty of perjury, do swear or affirm
Under penalty or perjury, I do swear or affirm
that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth during this proceeding.
that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth during this whole proceeding.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Prince.
And just so we're on the same page, were my instructions fairly clear? We know where we're headed.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Ms. Rutten, Judge Minor.
Good morning.
I participated, excuse me? I participated in that meeting in question, and I was confused about several things. First, I was under the impression that Ms. Kidd was the chairman and acting mayor with the absence of Mayor Downey. And as it turned out later in the meeting, I heard Mayor Downey and maybe somebody made a remark or made a motion or something, and I realized he is here, he's on the telephone. So he really wasn't absent. And I considered that to be, a little bit confusing, but I understood that he had been sick, but apparently he was still here, although not physically. I also was very confused at the end when Ms. Kidd had made the comment, which I believe the panel heard during its video presentation, of parts of that meeting, although not in its entirety. Ms. Kidd made the statement that there will be a second comment period. This was made, I think, at about the 6:30 mark when the first comment period ended. And she reassured the crowd, which was significant at that time, that they would all have a chance to speak. And as I recall, I think there were 7 people signed up to speak during that second comment period, which was to take place after the end of regular business that night. And in fact, regular business did occur, and I think that Ms. Kidd also made some confusing remarks about the time of a recess. I think, as I recall, she said first we're going to take a 2-minute break, and then I recall Councilman Meredith getting up, and then she said something, there was going to be a 5-minute break, and then we moved into the second comment period time, during which Mr. Flood, and I may say this, that I heard, and I ran for city council in 1980. I'm not a stranger to these chambers. And I must say that I heard some of the finest public speaking that I've ever heard here.
I heard it too, Mr. Libera, and I concur. Let me bring you back, though. I see where you're headed. I see where you're headed, sir. Take a moment, though, and take what you said and apply it to Section J, okay, to reaffirm Mrs. Smith's contention of a violation of Section J. Take a moment and come back on point to Section J with what you said. That's where we're headed, sir.
Thank you. Well, all right, to sum up, then, I don't remember the time, I think it was around 9:30 when the second comment period began, and Mr. Flood took this podium where I am now and began what I consider to be a very good speech. I was honored and privileged to listen to it and others, and I wanted to hear them all, frankly, and I would hope that the council would have heard them all too. So during his speech, he was gavelled down and he was interrupted prior to his 3-minute time. I seem to recall Ms. Kidd doing that to others as well, particularly others who had a certain viewpoint that didn't seem to match hers. So then, frankly, all hell broke loose. Well, not really, but it got, Mr. Flood was asked to leave, Cherie, Kidd.
We saw the video, Mr. LeBray.
Gavelled down and adjourned the meeting.
I see your final point. Let me help you if I may.
Certainly.
Take that point with Mr. Flood, apply it to Section J, so we can conclude where you're headed. But let me bring you back to where we are.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Clearly, Mr. Flood's rights were violated, in my opinion. Clearly, Mr. Flood had a right to state his opinion to the council. Clearly, the people who were lined up, including Ron Richards, who's now a commissioner, who was an ex-county commissioner and is now running again, had a right to speak. And in my opinion, the meeting was adjourned inappropriately. That's the best way I can say it right now. And clearly, others must have shared that opinion, as others in the administration stayed, as other council members stayed, as Mr. Collins, who got up and walked to the door but didn't leave, went back over there and stayed. He showed the respect that the council members, as elected officials for this city, who represent the public who's here today, where there's many others following this on the news, have a right to speak and a right to have their opinions heard, and not only heard, but I believe constitutionally majority should rule, and I think that's where Ms. Kidd fell down. Any questions?
No, well, not for me, but I'll turn it over to my colleagues. Mrs. Rutten. And Judge,
No, sir, thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
You're very welcome, sir. Again, please understand, I'm doing my very best to give you witnesses as much latitude as I can. But again, we have a very narrow focus. And I'm doing my very, very best, as politely as I can, to bring you back on point if you begin to stray. I know it's easy. Gosh, I know it's easy to stray from point. Reminder, facts. Section J, violation, no violation. The more you winnow it down, the more points you'll drive home to the committee, because we're only writing down facts. So if you can winnow it down and drive home your points, it is to your benefit, and it'll make my life easier. Please. Mr. Robert Flood.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Ms. Jennifer will address you.
I state your name and residential address.
I, Robert John Flood, 1438 View Vista Park.
Under penalty of perjury, do swear or affirm
Under penalty of perjury, do swear and affirm
that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth during this proceeding.
that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth during this whole proceeding.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Flood.
Good morning, Mr. Prince, Judge Meyer,
Good morning.
Ms. Rutten.
The floor is yours, sir.
I didn't quite know how this was going to be proceeding, so I didn't have any prepared statements.
We'll give you some latitude, a little leeway, but I think you saw where I was headed.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
There are 2 points in that, in section J, which unfortunately I don't have in front of me. However,
You can have mine, sir, for reference. That's perfectly fine. If that will help you winnow down your remarks, I'm all for it.
okay. I would say that, I want to,
Take your time, sir.
item 8, in regards to public officials shall conduct themselves toward, sorry, do you want to vote that?
You can just read it. You don't need the number.
The public officials shall not use language or engage in acts that demean, harass, or intimidate another person.
Thank you.
During the entire meeting, except for one person who spoke for 4 minutes and 15 seconds in the pro side of the meeting, or she had pro comments towards the floor. Just about every person that was speaking anti was cut off anywhere from 1 minute and 30 seconds to 2 minutes and 45 seconds. There may have been some that were able to complete, but no one went over the 4 minutes or over 3 minutes. In regards to my ending, I was cut off in basically mid-sentence.
You were the last speaker that evening, officially.
I was the last official speaker that evening, yes.
Thank you, sir.
My speech, my last quote, it was actually the last quote that I was going to be using.
We've heard it.
I was
Go ahead,
very
sir.
close to being finished. I was not able to give it was a paraphrase of a newspaper article from your sports person, you know who I'm speaking of. It was misattributed to being a quote from the Bible, which I'm not a Bible person. I am a history person.
Let me help you if I may.
Yes.
I know exactly the point to what you're referring. Take that point, refer back to section J, and drive home your point to the committee. You were stopped in mid-sentence before you were able to finish your public comment. Am I correct, sir?
That is correct.
Thank you. Reference the section J part that was violated by that action. You can just paraphrase.
I would say it would be the one that I previously read, shall not use language or engage in acts that demean, harass, or intimidate another person. As well, public officials shall conduct themselves toward the public in a civil and professional manner that will foster public respect and cooperation.
That's where I was hoping you would lead back to, sir, from a factual standpoint. Was that acceptable to you?
That is good.
Something else for us, sir?
I think that's all I have at the present. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to.
We just may. Judge Minor.
No, thank you.
Mrs. Rutten.
No, thank you.
I'd like to, two things. Thank you for being here. Just to reiterate, I didn't want to put words in your mouth. I meant no disrespect. I wanted you to winnow back, stay back. I know where you were headed. And if you head to section J, as you did, sir, and you nailed the point that I was hoping you would nail, it makes our life easier. Was that acceptable to you?
Very good.
All right, Mr. I'll take that back as my only
Yeah.
copy.
And thank you very much for
Thank you.
everything you're doing.
You're very welcome, sir.
You're not my lieutenant.
Judy Han Gartner.
Oh, I didn't know I was.
You may pass, ma'am. You're on the list. If you either just sit and be an observer, we're not going to argue.
Well, I think I have to pass because I was not present. I just watched the video.
Fine. Ma'am, is it Judy?
Judy.
You're on the list. If you would say, Mr. Prince, I'm very comfortable here. I'm not forcing you to get up, but you have the opportunity.
Thank you. I'm very comfortable here.
Then I would trade places with you if I could.
Okay.
Dan Bateman. Bateman.
Bateman.
Bateman. Thank you. Dan, come up, sir. Dan, Miss Jennifer will address you.
Please state your name and residential address.
I, Dan Batum, 207 Walcott Street, Port Angeles.
Under penalty of perjury, do swear or affirm.
Under penalty of perjury or
Do swear or affirm
do swear or affirm
that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth
that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth
during these proceedings.
during these proceedings.
Thank you.
Good morning, sir.
Morning, Mr.
How are you?
Fine.
May I offer you a tiny suggestion? This will
Sure.
be, I think, very helpful for you. You see where we're headed. We have a Section J document, which is our only relevant document. Okay, and I know this is new to a lot of you folks, and I understand that. Focus on that baby right there, okay, as you speak. The floor is yours,
I
sir.
don't have a copy, but I think I got the gist of it.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I do believe that there were ethics violations by this kid in the evening in question. I was at that meeting. I was also signed up to speak during that second public comment period that we had been promised. The meeting was supposedly adjourned before I got that opportunity. According to Section J, I think it's Section J, and Robert's Rules of Orders especially, I don't believe that meeting was adjourned properly. When this kid had left the city council chambers, I believe the meeting was still in session because there was no public procedures followed. I think, well, as far as I can tell, was the fact that she did disrespect the public. That's addressed in Section J.
It is, sir.
And constantly gaveling down people that were allowed to be up here at this podium and speak, interrupting them constantly, telling people it's inappropriate what they were saying, stifling free speech, was not fostering public respect or mutual cooperation between the city council and citizens. It did not help get business done.
Let me help you, Dan, if you don't mind. Let me help you, Dan. Could you speak specifically to one point where you thought the deputy mayor said that's not an appropriate comment? Does something come to mind that's a factual thing that we saw in the video that you witnessed in person?
Seems to me that she had said it several times. I'm pretty sure, and I'm trying to go on memory here.
That's right.
It's been a few months. I believe it was Mr. Flood he was the one and only that got to speak before she left the council chambers during the city council's second comment period. I believe that was one of the times where she said that was inappropriate, when she didn't like something that he had said.
Okay. See, I'm trying to get you back to Section J, and you did a good job there. Continue, Dan.
Okay. I've seen in the newspapers and heard other comments that city council does not have to follow Robert's rules of procedures. They do have to follow parliamentary procedures. Historically, I've come to meetings for the last year for most of them. They have followed Robert's rules of order as far as I can tell. It seems that this kid doesn't want to follow those procedures when it's inconvenient for her. The reasons for parliamentary procedures is so that all sides can be heard during a meeting. The free speech isn't stifled. That opinions could be expressed, even dissenting opinions to somebody who's sitting in the main seat there, the chair, during city council. The throwing rules out arbitrarily is improper, does not foster public respect. Getting back to Section J.
Well done. Correct.
Those are the main points that I wanted to make.
That last one was on point, and I thank you for that. You referred back to the section that we have referenced. Stay right there, sir.
Yes, sir.
Judge Minor, questions for Dan?
No, thank you, sir.
I don't remember, how do you say your last name, I'm sorry?
Beta.
Badum. Thank you, Dan.
No, I haven't, thank you.
Mr. Badum, thank you for your participation.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You're most welcome, sir. Ms. Eloise Clallam. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. I'm going to effectively take the path as Judy Hangartner did.
All right.
I'm president of Our Water, Our Choice. And I have submitted, along with this entire group, a statement to that group in writing. It is not targeted in the way you would like. So I will let it rest at that.
Now, just, you can hang that, hold that for the lady.
Oh.
That statement that you referenced, do we have that?
You have a written statement from Our Water, Our Choice.
In one of these binders?
No, it's not in the binder. At least I didn't put it in the binder.
We have it.
Yes, you have it.
Thank you.
And it is a more general type of statement than you're wanting right now. But I hope you'll have a chance to see our critique of the hearing as it has proceeded thus far. Partly it's critical of the procedure that you are outlining and playing with. Thank you.
You're welcome. In response to your hope, I personally have read and will read whatever's in front of me. Okay? No information will go discarded or disregarded. Okay? If somebody gives me something to read, I assure you I will read it. You are going to pass, though, the opportunity to be up here.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. Janet Kalin. If this was a track meet, I would yell, scratch. Mr. Dale Wilson. Scratch. Duran Metlay.
He was unable to come, but you should be emailed a statement that he made, so it would have come to you today.
Okay, off the top of my head, sounds good.
Perfect.
I need
Sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes Mrs. Smith's testimony and Mrs. Smith's witnesses. With your permission, Mrs. Smith.
Because the notification I received was on Thursday night before Good Friday, before the Easter weekend, it was difficult to know who would be able to come and who wouldn't be able to come. So I included those 1 through 100 in case anyone would want to speak who wasn't on my list.
We know you did that. In responding to that, and I'm sorry to hold my hand up, I apologize for that. In responding to that, I have 2 responses. Stay with me, please. Number 1, today's procedure was voluntary. According to the council rules of the committee, of the ethics committee, today was not necessary. We, as a council, as a committee, said, let's bring some folks in. Give Mrs. Smith, give Mrs. Kidd, in that having witnesses, okay? This was voluntary, by our choice. It was not required, not mandated. The stipulation we put on was, you want witnesses? Great. The list goes to Miss Jennifer, their names, by noon yesterday. The same stipulation was given to Mrs. Kidd as given to Mrs. Smith. Now, maybe I'm a hard-nosed, but we're holding to that. Names on the list, the podium is yours. Names not on the list, I'm sorry, you're not on the podium. We're treating each lady, I think, fairly and equally. I understand what Mrs. Smith is saying. I'm sorry. They're not on the list provided by Miss Jennifer. They will not testify. We'll take a very short break if you need the restroom. Mrs. Kidd, when we return, you're up. Miss Jennifer? Miss Jennifer's got business. You okay?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bloor, you all right, sir? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, one of our witnesses had to leave for a moment, and we went faster than he anticipated. He is on the list. The 3 of us would like to hear his testimony. He has been submitted on time. He had to run out. He thought he could get back. We're obviously moving more quickly than we anticipated, and I'm very proud of that fact. Mr. Dale Wilson, sir, the podium is yours.
Thank you. Let me turn my phone off.
That would be wonderful. You're like my son and my daughter, permanently surgically attached. We're so proud. Now, Mr. Wilson, before we give you the oath, may I take a moment? I don't know if you were here when we explained the parameters of the testimony.
I was.
You were. Mr. Smith, Mr. Wilson, Ms. Jennifer.
Thank you. I state your name and residential address.
I, Dale Wilson, on West 4th Avenue in Port Angeles.
Under penalty of perjury, do swear or affirm
Do, under penalty of perjury, do swear or affirm
that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, as long as my wife is not.
During these proceedings.
She may want to ask me some questions later
During these proceedings.
during these proceedings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Wilson, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you for responding to me earlier. I hope I wasn't rude.
Surprised but not rude, no.
What's that, sir?
I was surprised, but no, I didn't think it was rude
Thank you
at
very much. The floor is yours.
all. Thank you. And again, I didn't realize I was on the witness list, but I was here the night in question on February 2nd, and I was surprised and dismayed at the behaviors emanating from the city council, more likely the deputy mayor that night. And it started really from the beginning. I'm still not sure if that was a legitimate meeting that night, because as you know, having watched the film, that the mayor was in attendance. And with the mayor in attendance, there's no procedure for the deputy mayor to take over the meeting. He was on the telephone, and I'm supposing he could have chaired the meeting, or they could have done as is proper to have a vote. And if you'll listen closely on the video that you watched, There is a voice when Mayor Downey over the telephone suggests that Deputy Mayor Kidd run the meeting, there is a voice in the background saying, we need a vote, we need a vote, we need a vote. And that was completely ignored by Ms. Kidd, but she took over the gavel, and that was my first concern. The second concern, as has been done before, but never so
Fair, I'm sorry, and I don't want to interrupt, but I want to be accurate. We need a vote, we need a vote, we need a vote. Was by whom or from whom?
could not tell. There was a female voice, it was coming from up here. I could only
I
assume-
thought you meant it came from the telephone.
No,
It came
no.
from the panel.
No, it came from the city council, and I'm assuming it was Sissy, but I'm not certain.
Continue, sir.
The second thing that concerned me was that every one of the people who came to speak and address the council, first of all, in the 2 or 3 months before, there was hardly any limit to the number of people who could come and speak. In fact, the public comments 6 and lasted an hour and a half, 2 hours sometimes. Suddenly it was scaled down. Suddenly everybody was limited to 3 minutes. Well, that's not new. The 3 minutes was there. But anyway, at about 2.5 minutes, and some was about 2:15, 2:30, Ms. Kidd would barge in on their comments and tell them to summarize their remarks. Now, some people don't know this. I've taught public speaking at the college level for years and years, and most of you know that's one of the most difficult things there is to do, to speak in a crowd, and especially a crowd of people you don't know. And so for someone to try to throw you off your speed, try to throw you off your remarks by, and it wasn't politely, it was more or less arrogantly, summarize your remarks, up until it came to one of the people with whom I think was in agreement. No comment was made about summarize your remarks for about 3 minutes and 5 or 6 seconds. So there was an obvious bias between the speakers that were not on the favored status and those that were on the favored status. All of them were interrupted during their speech, but one not until after 3 minutes was up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Take a moment, if I can, I know that you have it in front of you. Focus that remark back to section J. I mean, where does that lead us?
Well, it's disrespectful to the people. I mean, let's face it, we've got a multi-million-dollar budget here, and the only opportunity that people get to come and address the council, and believe it or not, there's some people back on this side of the dais that have information that would be very beneficial to the city council. And so when they come here, get up off their easy chair at home, maybe take a bath, maybe comb their hair, come up here and attempt to provide the city council with the feedback it needs to make these multi-million-dollar decisions. It's wise to let them make their decisions. Whether you listen to it or not, we'll never know, but it's wise to let them go ahead and finish their comments, make their comments.
That is a point I can attest to here, Mr. Wilson. That was a straight up point. I thank you for that.
And the other part of it is, again, with the adjournment. I thought it was very unprofessional for this kid to jump up, grab her coat, and stand there saying, I'll sit down again if you'll behave yourself. And the only one that was misbehaving that night, in my opinion, was the deputy mayor. But she was actually holding the city council hostage by saying, I'll sit down again and continue this meeting if you'll be civil. And in fact, there was nobody being uncivil until she started having the hissy fit that she had. And at that time, it came off the tracks.
Wait, back to section J, Mr. Wilson. Don't stray on us, please. I can't write that fast. The adjournment issue.
There was no motion for adjournment. There was no discussion of adjournment. There was a gentleman standing here where I am now who had already been recognized and was attempting to address the council. And when the council meeting was abruptly shut off unitarily by the deputy mayor.
No, that you came right back to section J, and I thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I wanted you to hit that point before you close.
Thank you.
Stay there. Oh, no, this is too much fun there, Mr. Wilson. Mrs. Rutten.
Mr. Wilson, you made a comment, I'm referring to section J because you felt that it was disrespectful to ask people to summarize, but you made a comment that somebody that was pro Ms. Kidd got to speak longer and wasn't asked to summarize.
Well, they were asked to summarize, but only after the 3-minute mark.
After the 3-minute mark. All right, thank you.
Hang on to that, thank you. Judge Minor.
Mr. Wilson, you were present at the adjournment?
No, sir, I watched the adjournment actually on the film.
Okay. All right.
No, you were not present physically when the meeting was stopped.
I was here for the most, probably 75% of the meeting, and the adjournment part of it I did watch on video.
Honest answer, thank you.
All right, thank you, sir.
Mr. Wilson, thank you again. And thank you for letting me speak to you about our first issue. I appreciate your honesty with me. The next part of our procedure this morning is the opportunity for Deputy Mayor Kidd to address the committee in regards to the events of 2 February 2016, and that will be followed by any witnesses that Mrs. Kidd submitted by noon yesterday. Mrs. Kidd, we're all yours. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Prince, Judge Minor,
Good
Mrs.
morning.
Rutten. Good morning.
Miss Jennifer is running the show.
All right. Good morning. Good morning, Jennifer.
Please raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I state your name and residential address.
I'm Cherie Kidd, 101 East 10th Street, Port Angeles, Washington.
Under penalty of perjury, do swear or affirm
Under penalty of perjury, do swear or affirm
that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth
that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth
during this proceeding.
during this proceeding. Thank you.
Good morning, Mrs. Kidd.
Good morning.
Now, stay with me, please, and grant me some indulgences, okay? Stop me if I make an error. You're very good at that. We required Mrs. Smith and her witnesses to try their best to factually state why your actions violated Section J of the Ethics Code. I now assume we'd like to give you the opportunity to factually state to us, the committee, why your actions did exactly the opposite. No way did they violate Section J of the Ethics Code. I got the okay to go ahead.
Thank you.
It's all yours, Mrs.
I
Kidd.
presented each of you with a notebook, and I have one here. So I just went through the complainant's submission and tried to address each point that I thought was significant. And so I will be doing that, and all of them are intended to answer the reasons why there has been no violation of Section J. So I have in different parts, and if I may start, and if it's going off the wrong way, we can discuss it.
I think you would agree with me that we have been fairly flexible with everyone. We're trying to work through this as a team. And if we stay on point, we'll work together. If I think you're drifting,
Right.
I'll bring you back.
Well, I'm trying to stay on point. That's why I organized it in a focused notebook.
The floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. The first section are council rules of procedure, and and it's very specific about the rules and the responsibilities of the chair of the meeting. And on page 4, section 7, it talks about procedural decisions shall be made by the chair of the council, who may represent advice in such matters from the city attorney, or may refer to Robert's Rules of Order newly revised. So procedural actions lie within the authority of the chair. So when we're talking about breaks, those are procedural behaviors. That is in the authority of the breaks, authority of the chair, acting chair. So there was no violation there. Also, on page 6 of the council rules of procedure, section 9A, public comment guidelines. If you look at the last paragraph, to allow time for the council to complete its legislative agenda. Comments should be limited to no more than 3 minutes per person for a total of 15 minutes for this comment period. At the discretion of the mayor, the time allotted for public comment and the time allotted per person may be lengthened or shortened. Those are the rules under which I act as mayor, and so enacted as acting mayor that evening. If we'll, well, I have page 6 and I turn the page to page 5, so just the way it was hole punched. So if we look at page 5, section 9, order of business. The mayor may determine the order of business for a particular city council meeting. The agenda should be arranged to best serve the needs or convenience of the council and the public. That also, I believe, addresses the rate issue. There was no violation.
Page 9?
Sorry, 5, sir.
Thank you. I couldn't find it.
5.
Thank you. Continue. You're hitting your points factually, which is what we're trying to establish, so please continue.
Yes, sir. On the next section is role of the chair. Again, procedural decisions shall be made by the chair of the council, who may request advice from the city attorney or may refer to Robert's Rules of Order. Robert's Rules of Order was designed to keep order and decorum and allow meetings to function appropriately, efficiently, fairly. And so one person is chosen to preside over the meeting, and this person enforces the rules and designates who is to speak at any given time. It is the responsibility of the chair to conduct the meeting in an orderly manner. The presiding officer shall preserve order and decorum in the council chambers. The chair essentially runs the meeting by recognizing who gets to speak. The chair controls the meeting, and the chair should pace the meeting, ensuring it should run on time. To enforce on all occasions the observance of order and decorum. So, for Angeles City Council, again, rules of procedure under which I must abide. The mayor may determine the order of business. So that the role of the chair has to ensure order and decorum. So if we turn to the next section regarding signage. Signage became a topic of conversation this year, and we have a new council this year and a new mayor, and we had never had such a deluge of signage in the council chambers. Speakers would come up and leave a large sign here and go away. The front row, the entire council was covered with, and we appreciate and respect free speech. But we refer to our city attorney regarding signage in the council chamber. Yes, sir.
Mrs. Kidd, one moment, please. The judge.
Just to clarify, when you were speaking of these signs and they're all lined up here, was that the meeting of February 2nd?
January, the two meetings in January, and so, and then also February 2nd. But yes, but before the February 2nd meeting, I asked the city attorney's opinion on the signage because I understood the issue of signs in the city hall to be a limited public forum. I received advice from our city attorney, and if you look under your section on signs, where it says the city hall is not a traditional public forum. I had been used to seeing, we had protesters outside City Hall and, the courthouse, you see that. But it was unusual that to have them bring into City Hall chambers. So I sought the advice of our city attorney. And the city attorney said that City Hall and Council Chamber are limited public forums. City Hall being classified as such is nothing new or unique about Port Angeles. As far as I'm aware, Port Angeles City Hall has always been considered a limited public forum. And most, if not all, city halls in the state fall under the limited public forum designation.
Mrs. Gibb?
Yes, sir.
Did you get the answer that you wanted? Did you want to follow up on?
Well, just to clarify again, during the meeting of February 2nd, there were signs in the council chambers?
Yes, sir, there were.
How many, do you know? Approximately?
I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't want to move on to, you were
No, that's
totally comfortable.
Okay.
Mrs. Kidd, thank you. Continue, please.
All right. In short, citizens do not have a legal right to speak at a council meeting, and we'll get to that. Most councils do extend an opportunity. Okay, that's on public comment. We'll get to that in a moment. The same is true for signs. Signs on the sidewalk outside City Hall generally are located in a traditional public forum and are given the greatest protection of free speech. In contrast, signs inside City Hall can be prohibited or regulated, and they routinely are. So I did not make an arbitrary decision at all. I discussed with the city attorney about the appropriateness because it had come to a point where it was distracting. We're here to conduct the meeting of the city business of Port Angeles. That's our function, that's our responsibility. Signage had been distracting, so and it had the nature of the ad hominem and personal attack tone rather than factual. So anyway, it was a discussion with the city attorney who said this is not the appropriate place for that. And the discussion was also, Mayor Downey was in on discussed that, and the city manager Dan McKean. So we discussed what is appropriate in running our city council meeting. So there was no violation. I referred to my attorney as I was necessary, and I acted according to my legal advice as acting chair, but I also referred to with the acting mayor and the city manager, and we did not have a history of signage being represented on that scale.
Yes, Mrs. Kidd, thank you. Let me help you. You provided an excellent piece of material to work on here. Your last one was keep focusing back to J.
Yeah, so there's no violation on J because I am seeking legal advice to act appropriately. Now, there's another section on January 19th, 2016, the previous meeting, and I need to bring this in to give you additional facts, that's all, just to give you. The previous meeting, we began at 4:45 p.m., but there were so many people here to speak that the mayor at that time is a very gracious and patient man, and there were so many people signed up to speak that he allowed everyone to speak, which is an extension of our normal procedure. And so many people spoke that finally at 10:15 p.m. the public comment period was over and we took a break. But legally, our meeting is supposed to end by 10 p.m. Our work is supposed to be finished. We have not even begun our work. We reassembled at 10:30 p.m. I made a motion to legally extend past the 10 p.m. required time frame, and then we began our business meeting, and we did not adjourn until the midnight hour. This was a hardship on council members, it was a hardship on staff, and it was a hardship on the public that had to wait till almost midnight for the second comment period. This is not how we run efficient meetings. And so he was trying to allow complete public comment because he's such a gracious person and we listened patiently. But we could not. I had complaints from council members, from staff, from spouses, from the public, that people come here to attend our meeting and it's supposed to be finished at 10 p.m. So we had to get back to normal business.
Please address that. How was that statement? I understand that the January 19th meeting went till almost midnight.
So now you're aware.
Take that fact.
So now we're going to Jay. Now we're going back to Jay. So there was no violation of Jay on February 2nd because I was following normal procedures. At the beginning of our meeting, I explained to the public, our last meeting went till midnight. I'm sorry, we cannot do that. We have a 15-minute public comment period, but tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to extend that to 30 minutes, which I did. So I, as acting mayor, and also I had the mayor was on the phone, and he was asked, I believe, to have some input on that, but anyway, but I took that 15-minute period and I lengthened it to 30 minutes. And I explained also that that is our procedure. I was following the rules, so there was no violation. Also, I asked at the beginning of our meeting, before public comment, I said, ladies and gentlemen, I asked for courtesy and respect. They were forewarned. Ad hominem and personal attacks are not appropriate in any council chamber, any courtroom, any meeting under Robert's rules or any procedural orders. Those are not appropriate. So I warned them up front that I asked for courtesy and respect. And so there was no violation of that. Now, I believe that there was a misinterpretation. I know in Marley Smith has talked about the right to public hearings, to speak at public hearings. Yes, that's apples and oranges. We have a public hearing procedure that's put on the agenda. So if we're going to talk about the budget, we open it up for public hearings where people don't have a 3-minute time limit. They come up and speak, and that's true. But public comment period, there is no legal right to public comment period. It is at our city council wishes to grant that to the public before and after because we wish to hear from the public, but it is not a legal right. So we have to put restrictions on that, which are in there, so there's no violation on that. So also, again, in your section under public comment, Jennifer, may I have some water, please? Likewise, the rules of public comment, 3 minutes per person and 15 minutes total. In addition, they expressly grant to the chair, whether it be mayor or deputy mayor, the right to control, expand, limit public comment.
And that came from the city attorney, did it not?
That is from our rules of procedure. And also, every city in the state of Washington has the rules of procedure limiting public comment.
Okay, hold on,
Yes,
Mrs. Stay with me, please.
Yes, sir.
I'm reading what you're reading.
Yes.
And you read it verbatim.
Yes.
Just to clarify, you are reading...
From Mr. Bloor.
Thank you. From Mr. Bloor to Councilman Lee Wetham.
Yes, sir.
So basically, again, I'm trying to do my very best to keep everybody at J.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Stay with me and work with me. Going back to J. Based on the advice or even the instructions of the city mayor, or the city attorney, apologize, is why there's no violation. I just want to bring you back here.
Thank you. Based on the city attorney and based on our council rules of procedure.
Thank you. You take your water, catch your breath. We're doing fine.
And I gave you a list on the next page of some towns. Every city and town have rules for the public comment period. So it's applicable, and so to every city and town in the state of Washington.
Again,
Thank you. But for
you're
Port
welcome.
Angeles, I'm following the rules
There you go.
specifically for Port Angeles.
That would help us, please.
Yes, sir.
We are unique and we will run our own shop.
So if I can turn to the next section, about my 3-minute timing. We have a clock, we have a new clock. It's a digital clock up in the wall, and we can read it now. We had a round clock with the light, it was in the shadow, we couldn't read it easily. So thank you to the staff for giving us a clock that we could read. So for timing, you'll see that I was looking at the digital clock, and when someone would begin speaking, our first speaker began at 6:03 and 40 seconds. So I wrote down that time, therefore they had till 6:06 and 40 seconds.
Okay.
And you'll see I wrote down the time for every speaker because I need to be fair to every speaker regardless of the subject. I was being fair to every speaker. Now, my experience with...
Mrs. Skinny.
Yes, sir.
Catch your breath. Let me help you. You were here. The three of us watched the video. We took meticulous notes.
Yes.
And we have the time speaking of every speaker clearly delineated out to make your life simpler and to move us along. We've got this factual information that we, the committee, recorded.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we're not going to, say who's off by 5 seconds. We've got every speaker and their times.
Yes.
My suggestion to you is, got it.
Got it. I just want you to know I made such an effort to be fair. I was pointing that out, so there's no violation.
We understand,
And
Mrs. Kidd.
I also took upon myself trying to be courteous because at 3 minutes, people don't want to be cut off, and I don't want to. So as a courtesy, I would say, kindly summarize your thoughts at 2.5 minutes or 2 minutes and 45 seconds. As a courtesy to the speaker, not to be discourteous, but to be extra courteous.
We viewed the video.
Thank you.
And we were diligent in our video viewing. I think you would agree with that.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So there
You're
was
welcome.
no
Let's
violation.
move on
Let's
and
move on to the
keep our eye on the ball. The ball is Jay.
Yes, and then, so there was no violation there. For the adjournment, if you have a memo from, again, the Laura City Attorney, and the chair, who is generally the mayor, usually announces the meeting is adjourned without any particular formality. That's true. That's what Mayor DiGiulio did. That's what I also did. We didn't ask for a motion. The mayor adjourned. And when the meeting was over, everything had been finished, the mayor adjourned the meeting. There's not a formal requirement. So the fact that I didn't call for a motion is not a violation of J. So let's, and I would like to mention that I wanted to finish the meeting and completely, that was my goal, but when we started the second comment period, I had asked people to be courteous and respectful, so they had been forewarned, and as mayor, when I've conducted the meetings in the past, I have not allowed people to come to the podium and make scurrilous attacks against our staff or any council member. Calling names and personal attacks is not appropriate in a quasi-judicial, any type of government meeting, any type of meeting. And so, so I had forewarned the speaker, but when it was ad hominem personal attacks, name calling, it didn't matter what the names were, it was inappropriate. And so at that point, now what you did not see on the video, may I give you a broader range of facts, please? Because it goes back
Don't do
to
that
Jay.
yet. Don't do that yet. Don't do that.
Yes, sir.
Please, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I don't want you to say something that we don't want to hear. I know that sounds weird.
Okay.
The three of us, sorry, Miss Jennifer, the three of us in public forum limited our viewing of the video to when Mrs. Kidd was there on the video. That's what we saw. And we decided we're not looking at anything else but that. Now, hold on, this is for my colleagues. They're going to overrule me. They're very good at that. Mrs. Kidd would like, even though she's got the podium, and I understand that, we're trying to keep folks on topic. If I didn't see it on the video, I don't care. That's my, that's how I feel. I think Mrs. Kidd needs to move on, but 2 overrides 1.
If I understood what Ms. Kidd said, that she wanted to broaden the perspective at the time of the adjournment, would that include your vision of what was happening in the audience? Because I would be interested in knowing that, because I don't think that was on the video.
It was not, sir.
Okay?
The video was very focused and didn't give you an accurate vision of what was happening on the dais and in the audience.
Okay, let me make a counterpoint to my colleague. I'm sorry for the visor. I do apologize. I cannot see a thing. Miss Jennifer, fix those lights. The complaint virtually stops. Mrs. Smith's complaint stops when Mrs. Kidd leaves the video. There's really not anything in the complaint that I can see that Mrs. Smith is upset about once Mrs. Kidd left the table. Why would I want to, why do I care what happened after Mrs. Kidd left?
No, I'm not asking her
I want
for
you
that.
to know.
Hold on, ma'am.
I'm not asking her for that. I'm asking her for what she saw and heard just before and at the time she adjourned the meeting.
That's not what I heard Mrs. Kidd say she wanted.
No, before I adjourned.
And we saw that on the video?
No, sir, you did not.
How did we not see that?
Because the camera was focused on me, not the entire council.
But we were, oh. Excuse me, folks. Excuse me. I know you all have a very strong opinion on this point, and if I'm not mistaken, it's a rather crucial point. Please let us converse aloud for your benefit, but keep those thoughts right up here, because I'm struggling here. I want to do this right.
I just want to explain the circumstances under which
I understand that, Mrs. Kidd. I'm going to work with you here.
Thank you.
And I worked with Mrs. Smith, and I hope you think I treated her fairly.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and I hope, and be honest, I hope you think I'm treating you fairly.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't care how this turns out. When I go out there today, I want everyone to say, boy, they gave everyone a fair shot. You're going to tell us now what you saw as a person, but we didn't see on the video. Am I correct?
Yes, I want to explain the circumstances under which I had to adjourn.
I think that's appropriate.
Mrs. Rutten, I'm afraid the ball's in your court.
I think it's appropriate appropriate because in all fairness, we have brought everybody else to task on J, and the majority of people talking have talked about the adjournment, and that was an issue.
Excellent.
And so in order to clearly see not just what was going on with you, we've talked about Mr. Downey on the phone, we've talked about other councilmen making statements, and if we did not see that on the video, then I think it's relevant in what we're trying to accomplish, particularly when you've got a complaint about adjournment.
Correct, I'm trying to address adjournment appropriately.
Well stated, Danetta. Well stated. Grant, as always, well stated. Continue.
So, when I told that Mr. Flood that his name calling was out of order, I had a council member who was seated to your right, Judge Minor, physically urge the crowd on and jump to his feet to raise his arms and urge the crowd to be boisterous. And so,
Who is this?
Council Member Whittle.
Okay, thank you.
And
Excuse me. I'm sorry. I deeply apologize. I'm just waiting for the folks who are listening to come back to point. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but no one will interrupt you on that side, okay? That would not be appropriate. I'm sorry. Continue.
I take full responsibility for the adjournment. But when you saw me trying to do this, calm people down, the place, Marilee Smith said in her complaint that at the time of adjournment, the audience was unstable. We just had one of her witnesses say all hell broke loose. We had a council member with an orange anti-fluoride signage on his chest stand and egg on the audience, and the crescendo of the noise in here went through the roof, and it's up to the chair to keep decorum and order the council member, and for public safety purposes, it was not safe. In Robert's Rules of Order, it says in an unstable environment, and if it's very disruptive, the chair must adjourn. It was not safe. It was very disruptive, according to Marley, according to her witnesses. And as I was trying to calm them down, I had a council member counteracting the chair. And I take responsibility for it. But it was...
I'm sorry, was this during Mr. Flood's comment?
It was after Mr. Flood's comment.
Okay, I want to get the time frame.
After Mr. Flood's comment. And I was... And some of the shouting and boos you could hear on the tape, some you couldn't. But as Mr. Whittle stood and raised his arm, you could hear on the tape the crescendo of the noise. It was no longer a safe environment. There was no longer decorum in here. And by all rules of parliamentary procedure, it was the best thing that I've been trained by the Association of Washington Cities in parliamentary procedure. If it's very disruptive, you adjourn the meeting. Now, what makes it possible to adjourn at that time was our business was finished. I did not preempt the meeting. I called for a second public comment period. I also asked for courtesy and respect, and I did my best to conduct it in a professional manner. And I'm very proud of our council, and I'm very proud of our city that this did not represent our city in good light. And I needed to take care of the situation that was happening at that moment that was beyond my control to continue to conduct a meeting.
I got it. And I understand what point you were driving home.
Therefore, there's no violation of Section J. I was following procedure.
Got it. Please, again, back to section J. That was a good summation of that point. And Judge Meyer and Mrs. Rutten were correct in letting you finish, and I thank them for that. Going to the next one?
The next one is not section J. I don't know if you want me to address it or not.
I see where you're going.
It's not section J.
No, I
So I
see.
don't need to address that.
No,
I'd like to leave it in your notebook for your perusal.
No, thank you. I made the commitment to you, I take that back. We made the commitment to you and to Mrs. Smith. We will read everything in front of us during our deliberations.
Thank you. And I would like to make a closing statement, if I may.
Of course, it's your podium.
Mr. Prince, Judge Meyer, Ms. Rutten, thank you for your service on the Ethics Committee. Volunteers are what make our town the wonderful town it is. I sincerely appreciate your service to the committee. And you know, it's an honor and privilege for me to serve on the Port Angeles City Council to represent the people of Port Angeles. And I'm grateful every day I have that opportunity. And I want to publicly thank the community for the outpouring of prayers and good wishes I've received. It's been a blessing. Port Angeles is a wonderful town. Let's build it up, not tear it down. Thank you so much.
Say there, Mrs. Kidd, thank you. In my opening remarks, I told everyone how I believe, what I believed. Mrs. Rutten and Mr. Minor, Grand Judge Minor, agree with me. We are you, you are us. We may disagree. We're on the same team. We may have a different opinion. Run the ball, pass the ball, but we're on the same team. Mrs. Kidd, reverting back. Oh, I'm sorry. You ready for the questions and answers? Ready for a question? May I go?
Move on.
Move on, then.
Questions of the witness?
From Mrs. Kidd, yes. Is that okay?
Do you want to ask questions?
I have,
Oh,
yeah, definitely,
please.
definitely. I was particularly taken with Mr. Dale Wilson's comment. I found it honestly enlightening. He used some words that I wrote down. During the public comment period, it is the only chance for the public to give feedback. I found that statement to be enlightening. I'm from New York City. Pretty hard to offend me. I offend a lot of people, and I have no idea I have. I go home, and my wife and my son, who is a sweet young man, says, "How could you do that?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" During a public comment period, Mrs. Kidd, is it your role, I'm thinking back to Mr. Flood, is it your role to say, "Whoa, you can't say that to us or me"? There are 7 members of the city council, are there not? Right. What if 6 thought, "Wow, that's a great point," and you didn't like it? Are you allowed to cut them off?
The chair has a responsibility for decorum and to keep order. So yes, sir, it was my responsibility.
Excellent.
I read the rules and there was no violation of section J.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to stay with Mr. Flood, okay? Thank you, but you don't mind me using you, do you, sir?
No.
Thank you. I was particularly taken in Mrs. Smith's complaint, and I highlighted it, so give me a moment. Where you took offense to what Mrs. Smith refers to as a benign analogy. Do you remember reading that in the complaint? Yeah. Mr. Flood's exact words were about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Then he said, and I think I'm quoting or darn close paraphrase, their names might as well be. How am I doing, Mr. Flood?
So that's quote.
Their names might as well be. Going back to Mr. Wilson's comment, you took offense to that statement, did you not?
Ad hominem and personal attacks are inappropriate in a city council meeting and
Can we work through that a little bit?
Yes, sir.
Can we work through that a little bit? Their names might as well be versus their names are. Are you with me? Where have I gone wrong?
Personal attacks is personal attacks.
Okay, fine, thank you. Okay, good. Now, may I follow up with another one, please? I watched the video with rapt attention. You and Councilman Wetham aren't exchanging greeting cards anymore or Christmas cards, are you? Did he file a complaint against you yet for what happened at that meeting? He was in, wrong verb, he was enraged. Is there a procedure for the city council members to complain against each other?
Yes.
Who was that?
That was,
I'm sorry, the question is from Mrs. Kidd. I didn't hear your answer. I don't want any answers there.
yes.
Yes.
This procedure was designed to do that.
No, this is from the citizens, is it not?
But it was designed for council members to be able to admonish a council member
Okay.
who's acting inappropriately.
And has that happened?
No,
No council member has taken you to official task for what you did on 2 February 2016?
no, sir.
Okay. If you and I disagree on public decorum, who's the judge?
It has to be the chair.
No,
The
we're-
chair's designated.
Okay, hypothetical there, Mrs. Kidd. You're the deputy mayor of City A, and I'm the deputy mayor of City B. Okay? You run your meetings as you see fit. Someone blinks an eyeball the wrong way, the public comment is over. I sit up here and I let them take it. I just let them blast away. Who's right?
Well, if you watch the video, we did take it. If you look at the previous meeting, when we were here till midnight, we take it and take it and take it. But there have to be limits or no one will sit on any council, no one will sit on any committees, no one will chair any meeting. If you do not have limits of decorum and responsibility, then we won't have local government as we know it now.
My final question to you, okay, ma'am? Thinking back to Mr. Flood's comments, that was the pivotal point of the evening, whether we like it or not. Had you not said anything, Mr. Flood had basically come to the end of his comment. Had you just sat there, in your opinion, we're not doing opinions, but I violated that rule. In your opinion, would we be here today?
Sir, I don't know because I'm not the complainant, but when I've had people come here who are unhappy about a utility bill or something and they start making personal attacks on staff, it is up to the chair to stop. There have to be limits on at-home attacks, personal attacks, and it's up to the chair, the responsibility to maintain decorum and set limits. And I was doing procedurally according to what I thought was best and appropriate at that time. I had forewarned all the speakers, courtesy and respect, please. I have listened to many comments over this last year. We've gone out of our way to lengthen public comment, and so we've really gone the extra mile, listening to many unflattering comments, and that's my job, and I do it well, as does the council. But we have to set limits on personal attacks, so that's not being a good chair. It's not running, setting decorum and conduct in the meeting, and we got to the point where it was disruptive and a safety issue. So
would you agree with me, and I am done now, this kid, and if you think I've been too brisk with you, accept my apologies. I'm just trying to work through this. Would you agree with me that much of Section J is totally subjective?
absolutely, it's subjective. But there are council procedures.
Yes, that's good.
And I'm following procedures.
I just wanted that on the record.
Yes, sir, it is subjective.
It is subjective, is it not?
Yes, sir, it is subjective.
It was written by, approved by, and implemented by the Port Angeles City Council, was it not?
Yes, sir.
And it is terribly subjective.
It is terribly subjective.
What you think is demeaning, I think is irrelevant. What I think is a compliment, some people take as an offense. Would that be a classic example of subjectiveness?
Yes.
Thank you for taking my questions. I appreciate it. Mrs. Rutten is next.
I just want a little clarification. Mr. Wilson made this comment that someone was speaking that was pro you or pro the subject, and you didn't ask them to summarize, and they went over the 3 minutes. In your mind, you know who that someone would be?
No, I don't, but I do know that we had a speaker, Rosemary Cockrell, that went over 4 minutes. She was not pro anything, or she was, you know, I showed you that list because I made an extraordinary effort to be fair. If again, this is subjective. If people are looking at my motives or mincing my words or trying to find fault, I'm not aware that I gave preference to anyone except Ms. Cockrell, and she got to go over 4 minutes, and even when I told her she was out of time, I kept saying thank you. I said please and thank you to everyone. I showed you the list where I tried to be fair. I made every effort to treat everyone fairly. I always have. I always do. That's the best I can answer.
And I appreciate that. I'm just...
I've never heard that, and I'm totally...
She wasn't pro-subject.
I have no idea why he said what he did. I'm not aware of it, but I'm trying to show you by showing you my notes and always saying please and thank you to every speaker and giving my, I've made an extraordinary effort to be fair to everyone. That's the way it should be.
Thank you.
Something else, Mrs. Rutten?
No.
Judge Minor.
Yes, thank you. Mrs. Kidd, you mentioned your training about adjourning a meeting. Could you tell us more about that, please?
Yes, in January I was in the Association of Washington Cities Parliamentary Procedure Training in Olympia, and we went through this seminar, and that was part of it. And I was given not only that in the program, but written materials.
Okay, can you tell us, as you can recall, an outline of what that training said about adjourning?
I just remember that the point that if it's in a very disruptive, environment becomes very disruptive, it's time to adjourn. It was the point that the speaker made. We were talking about, we're not the only town that has disruptive situations, and so they were addressing that specifically. Her name is Ann McFarland. She's a PhD, a parliamentary PhD.
Oh, the training was conducted by her?
By Ann McFarland. She's a PhD in parliamentary procedure and training. It's called Jurassic Park Parliamentary or something. She trains all over the country, I believe.
At the time that the meeting became disrupted, about the time that you adjourned the meeting, did you consider instead any other options? For example, did you consider expelling Mr. Flood?
What you could not hear on the tape was the tremendous roar and boos and catcalls and insults that were crescendoing. And I felt that for public safety, it's perhaps best not to just expel Mr. Flood at that point. We did have police presence here, but he was one gentleman. And we had the crowd, according to the other speakers, all hell broke loose. I felt that the safety of the public was in question, and I made the best choice that I could at the time.
It's laughable, I'm sorry.
Excuse me. I'm sorry, Judge. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Judge. I don't want to interrupt you.
No, you go ahead.
Mr. Wilson, I'm over here, sir. Please correct me, sir, if I am wrong. I think I have tried my utmost to be polite to every single person and ask for absolute decorum. I know you may disagree with things you heard. I respect that totally, sir. Please meet me halfway, sir. I'm sorry, Mrs. Kidd. Judge Minor, would you like to? I lost that whole question. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
The commotion and crescendo of noise continued to escalate.
Your comment that someone said already, all hell broke loose, and then I lost it. I apologize.
Just saying the level of noise, the crescendo of noise continued to escalate. I felt it was totally out of control, and at that point it was needed. I did the best I could under extraordinary circumstances.
All right, thank you. I don't think I have any further.
Mrs. Kidd, the committee thanks you for your testimony and for letting us question and answer you just as we did Mrs. Smith. Thank you.
And I thank you.
You're most welcome.
Very much.
You're most welcome. Is Laura O'Neill here? Stay seated for a moment. Okay, I'll be right back. I do apologize. I'm never going to get another kidney stone. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm very sorry. Miss Jennifer, are we okay?
Let me say something. In your absence, Mr. Wilson came up and said to me, I'm not sure if you even heard it, he said, may I make a statement? And I told him no, we were at recess or adjournment. So I don't know if you want to take that up or not.
Not at this time. Not at this time. According to our procedures, Mrs. Kidd had one witness submitted on time. Her name is Laura O'Neill, and she is present. Before we come up, Mrs. O'Neill, I know it's been a while, I want to remind you, tailor your testimony to a narrow scope, it's factual, and it reinforces Mrs. Kidd's assertions that there was no violation of Section J. And if you will do that, it will be to everyone's benefit. Please come up. Ms. Jennifer, you're in charge.
Raise your right hand, please. I state your name and residential address.
I, Laura O'Neill, 5403 South Angeles Road, Los Angeles.
Under penalty of perjury, do swear or affirm
Under penalty of perjury, do swear or affirm
that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth
I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth
during these proceedings.
during these proceedings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You are our last participant. Thanks for your patience, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I just have basically two things that I want to address, and they are relevant to what has been brought against Cherie as well as Jade. I'm not going to address the times of the speakers because, as you all have said and several have said, you have all that information, you've gathered it yourself, you've heard from other people, but I appreciate that you gathered those times for all the speakers. And so that's all I'm going to say about that. The second piece I would like to say is about the adjournment. And I was here that evening in the room. And I really respect and appreciate the fact that you let Cherie share the initial piece about what was going on in the room, that for whatever reason, the camera was focused specifically and only on Cherie during really, frankly, a very critical time. Would have been helpful if it had been, like around the room and the whole board, or the whole council, excuse me, but to me it does matter what was said in the last speaker's testimony, his speech. I don't know exactly the words used there. It's not just about the time, it's about what was said. And if we're going to talk about decorum and we're going to talk about respect, that has to be taken into consideration. And I guess, honestly, per the previous conversation, the chair, whether it was Mayor Downey or Cherie Kidd, and in this case it was Cherie Kidd, it matters really what they think. And in her opinion, it was disrespectful. And what was interesting to me, and I'm sure that you heard this as well on the tape, when the other council members, her name wasn't even mentioned. There were two council members' names mentioned in the diatribe of comparing them to these negative things. It wasn't even her name. She wasn't even taking up for herself. She was taking up for the respect of her other council members.
I remember when Mrs. Kidd attempted to stop Mr. Flood. Her name had yet to come up. Your point is well taken. Come back to Jay, which is in front of us, and hopefully in front of you.
It is. Thank you very much. And so the point I want to make is that Cherie tried to calm things down in the best of her ability. You didn't see it, but Mr. Witham did, I believe, egg on the crowd. You have a right to speak. He was talking to the crowd. He was egging them on. He was not supporting the council as a whole. But the piece I want to bring up that I have not heard is that things were slowly, from the very beginning, they were escalating for the entire meeting. There was a clear escalation of the audience. And it crescendoed at the point that the speaker began to disrespect by name the council. The room did erupt, nobody disagrees with that. You didn't really get to see it all from the tape, but I really feel like it was, frankly, the responsibility of whoever was in charge to call that meeting. It was really out of control. And if you want to use the word decorum, which everybody is using, it was not, the last speaker did not have decorum. It was, well, I won't speak to an opinion. The right thing was done in the situation at hand. Because if it hadn't been done, I'm frankly kind of worried about what might have happened. Because it wasn't just a dull hum the whole time. It was escalating. The conflict was escalating. It was becoming more and more hostile. Verbally, the energy in the room, the screaming, the applauding, the taunting, even two of the council members were becoming more audience members than they were council members, and that's an opinion, but it was absolutely escalating, and that is why I think J had to happen. I think that's why the meeting had to be adjourned. That's all I have.
No, that's well done. I hope I was helpful in pointing back to Jay. I mean, that's how you make your points, and you summarized it nicely. Decorum is a terribly subjective topic. Would you agree?
Mostly, I would agree with that.
In a political rally, candidates say just about whatever they want about the other side, but it's considered decorum. That's part of the game. If I'm a citizen and you're the mayor, and I have a chance to make a public comment, and I think you're just worthless, how am I supposed to tell you I think you're worthless unless I do it during the public comment period?
A, there are a lot of ways that you can make that comment, and B, you get to say it in a public arena, and you get to face the consequences for saying it. Because all of us get to say what we want to say, and there are also consequences to that. And some people, when they speak to other people, they really aren't necessarily wanting to be heard. They're not necessarily trying to make a point.
I'll go with you there.
They're trying to stir up or do whatever they're trying to do, I don't know.
Okay,
But to be heard, there needs to be a level of respect.
but let's ratchet that back, please.
Ratchet away, sir.
So the mayor, you're the mayor.
Yes.
I think you're worthless. That gives you the leeway to retaliate in a public comment period?
Well, I don't think that's what was said.
Well, time out.
Well, no, sir, I'm not going to time that out. I mean, if
Mr. Flood's comments.
in that case, I felt like the speaker's comments of that evening, had I been the mayor, I would have absolutely done what Cherie did.
Why?
Why? Because it's disrespectful, and it's also very personal attack. It is not speaking to the subject matter. It would be just like, sir, right now, Mr. Prince, if I said, you know, you really suck at what you're doing right here.
I would agree with you.
Yeah, well, I would not agree with me or you in that case. I think you've done an exemplary job.
Right. You did the right thing. You made your point, and I want you to know, whether you know or not, you made your point.
My point is that you now have a choice as the head of this council, as Cherie had a choice with a whole lot more people who were screaming and yelling. And this gentleman laughed, and you took exception to that, rightfully so. And he chose to listen to you. They did not choose to listen that night, and it escalated. That's the point I really want you to hear. There was an escalation that could have escalated completely and totally out of control. She made a judgment call, which was the right call. And it speaks to Jay. She had the right to do it. She had the obligation, in my opinion, to do it. I'm sorry, I'm getting excited.
No, you're doing the right thing. Come back to Jay and be as forceful as you like. That's what we want. She is forceful as you want to Jay.
She was the person in the position that had to make the call. Now, whether you would have served from New York, my mother's from New York, I totally get where you're coming from. If you would have made the same call, you may not have. You were not sitting in that chair. She was the one sitting in that chair. She had to make the call based on what her duty is, and she made that call. Some people might say it was a mistake. I don't call it a mistake. but there was absolutely nothing unethical about it. Nothing.
If I took your side, and if Mrs. Kidd did not stop the meeting at that point, and things got terribly ugly with terrible consequences, would we be obligated to hold Mrs. Kidd responsible for not stopping it?
Oh, undeniably.
Okay, thank you. Now, I'll be honest with you. I think I've been honest with everyone, okay? I found Mr. Flood's comments, since I'm an English literature major, I saw it. I mean, it appealed to me.
As it did many.
It appealed to me. You made a valid point, though, and I want to reiterate that to you, that you felt, through your testimony, Mrs. Kidd did too, that Mr. Kidd kind of lost his point, though. He got kind of off topic there. He lost the focus in your opinion and Mrs. Kidd's opinion. I understand that. I understand that. I cannot come into this room right now and yell fire. I'm no lawyer. The judge will tell me you're right, though. That's one thing I get right. I can't come in. That's no freedom of speech. I am struggling with the public comment period. And I think Mr. Wilson made a valid point. And I am struggling myself, balancing what people say in a public comment period and in the level of tolerance. I think you would agree with that. If I'm the mayor, each mayor has his or her own level of tolerance of what the public may say. Would you agree?
Each person has their own tolerance level?
As a mayor, I'm running the meeting.
Sure, absolutely.
Some will tolerate here, some will tolerate there.
Absolutely. May I, well, I'm going to tell you. The piece that's missing from what you said, and it's well taken from what you said a minute ago. If I came up here and I said, you are all three like the apocalypse. You are pestilence, you are whatever you are, whatever you are. And the room was like this, I doubt Cherie would have said, sir or ma'am, you're out of order. You need to please move on. And I think that that's what probably would have happened. But that is not the complete picture. You've got another council member waving his hands, stirring it up. You've got a lot of people who are really passionate, to put it politely, very, very upset. And, well, I'm addressing your question, I'm not addressing
you're on the right track. You're doing great.
So my point then is that it is subjective, but she was the one in the seat. And where you might not have done it, sir, but I can guarantee you, a lot of these people would have been probably kicked out, or you would have handled it very, very differently. Very differently. But the one comment which I feel was inappropriate, Cherie felt was inappropriate, was not the total picture.
I got that, and I was trying to lead you in that direction to clarify in my mind.
Leading the witness, I love it.
You did that very well. You did that very well, and I thank you for taking my pointed questions. I hope I wasn't offensive. I didn't mean to be. But you ever heard my father speak? You'd understand where I come from. Mrs. Rutten is next.
I don't have any questions at this time, thank you.
Judge Minor.
Ms. O'Neill, you were here when the meeting was adjourned, and you were here during the time prior to that. I mean, you were...
Yes, sir, the whole time.
Okay. Were there signs in the council chamber?
Thank you for bringing that up. Initially, there were a lot of signs everywhere, in the back, behind the garage door. There were many in the room, many. And then the signs went back to the level of the garage door. All the signs moved out of the chamber, except for 2 or 3 right up here. And I think there are some pictures that you can see on the film that I can't quite remember, but I mean, I sat here so I saw them, where people kept the signs here. And really, to your point, Judge, previously about why wasn't Mr. whatever his name was, ejected, or did you ask him to leave? Cherie did not push the point of those 2 signs being here, and I can't second guess why she didn't, but probably because she just was trying to keep decorum. And she allowed those 2 signs to stay kind of at, they could see them. They were quite large, but they kind of kept them either on their lap or on the floor. They weren't holding them up. And while, frankly, if I had been the mayor, I would have said, no, all the signs are out. And if I said the signs are out, period. Cherie chose to allow those couple to be here. Probably wise. I don't know, but that's my sign story.
Why, if you know, were the signs that were here moved toward the back, toward the garage door, as you call it?
Well, I don't know. I'm not exactly sure, except to say that there were a lot of them, and they were pretty disruptive, and a lot of them were get rid of certain members, and
Did someone ask them to take them outside?
I think so. I'd have to go back and watch the tape, but I'm sorry, I don't know for sure.
Were any of the signs that were in the chambers at the time that Mr. Flood was speaking, were any of them on poles or sticks?
I don't know. I think I was sitting in row 2, maybe 3, but and by this time, except for the 2 up front, which were not on sticks, most of them were behind. So I don't recall whether they were on sticks or not.
Behind the door or still in the chamber?
Well, kind of right at the door. And there were a few, actually, I believe, like in front of this window, but at the back of the room. But the vast majority of them were kind of literally lined up. If you opened the door, they were standing in the door right there.
And do you recall if any of those in the back were on poles or sticks?
I don't recall.
Okay. Thank you, that's all I have.
You've answered my question.
Okay.
The judge stole her thunder. Mrs. O'Neill, is it?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen. Yes, Mrs. Smith. Yes, Mrs. Smith.
I actually do what would be called, if you watch Judge Judy, a redirect. Because there are some answers.
Okay, momentito. Momentito. Mrs. Smith is asking for a redirect or rebuttal. I think our procedures today have been followed almost to the letter. We did not delineate out rebuttals or redirects. We had a very clear agenda. Bing, 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 bing. We have done those. I think we've given every side all due consideration. I understand Mrs. Smith's request. I turn to you for your wisdom.
I would ask her if I can counsel you as to briefly what she wants to say and how long she thinks it would take.
How do you feel? My point is we had a set agenda. We didn't write anything in when the last witness was done. We were going to thank folks for attending and adjourn. Would you like to add an element based upon Mrs. Smith's request, or stay with what we've got printed?
I'm going to say stay with what we've got printed. In all fairness, if Mrs. Smith gives a rebuttal, then we got to give time for Miss Kidd to go out and prepare hers.
May I make a compromise that if Mrs. Smith has a rebuttal or redirect, whatever the term is, she she's welcome to submit it to us during deliberations, and we'll take it then, write it out, tell us where people went wrong.
I have
Or just,
no objection to that. Mrs. Kidd should have the opportunity for some rebuttal to that.
the problem is, we have to get what Mrs. Smith sends to us, get it to Mrs. Kidd, she has to read it, then get her response. Am I correct that that would be right? Or we just say, no, we're done, everybody's had a fair chance, and the scales are balanced.
I would say it's your call.
That's not the first time he's done that.
It's only 3 small comments.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I do want to say thank you to you. I understand your situation, and you've been very courteous to us. But the judge has given me the option of making a call here.
Well, it's only...
Please don't say anything at all, because...
Fine.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Smith. I know you understand our dilemma. As far as I am concerned, as the chairperson of this committee, our testimony has come to a conclusion. We will not accept any more testimony, verbal or written. We have all we need to have. It was submitted timely and according to schedule. We're treating everybody as best we can, fairly. Would you like to make a last statement, Mrs. Rutten? Judge Minor, sir.
No, I don't.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll remind you what we're doing next. Tell your friends, this is clear. We are moving into private deliberations. No votes, no decisions, no outcomes are allowed in private deliberations. We have to stand in front of you in the very near future in open session and make those decisions. We have to claim ownership to our votes and our rationale. And all 3 of us are willing to do that. Whether you agree or not, we understand that. Just acknowledge, please, we're doing our best. Mr. Bloor, thank you. Ms. Jennifer, you are a wonderful employee, and we thank you for assisting us over these last almost 2 months. Ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned.